morning and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, derbyologist, and joining me again this week is Captain with Candace. Last week we handicapped the Sham Stakes, and Candace, let's review that first.
Yeah, I liked Christo in that race. He ended up coming in second. Midnight Hawk was the winner, and I think he did it pretty easily. He didn't seem to be too pressured too much in there. I think he won by a little over a length. He did what he had to do. I wasn't overly impressed, but there isn't much I can say bad about it per se.
I always look at races with 5 horses or less as match races. And in that race, after the race, Mike Smith said that he rode it like a match race. He came out of the gate. He made sure that Christo wasn't going to get the lead. And then Midnight Hawk, they did change the leads a couple of times. For Christo, I think the race actually was not what they wanted. They laid him up for 2 months. I think they wanted to teach the horse how to rate, and they were forced to go to the lead, getting the 1 hole. And right away they were involved in a little bit of a speed duel, and Midnight Hawk had the recency edge. So I was impressed with Christo and Midnight Hawk. They came home pretty slow, but that was actually a fast speed rating. So I think both those horses showed me a lot, but moving forward, I'm still a big Christo fan, even though I picked Midnight Hawk last week, which part of the reason why I picked him was because as I wrote in my blog, he's the now horse. We talked a little bit about last week is sometimes you make predictions on, when you're looking at the past performances, on how they've ran, and then sometimes you're projecting forward. So I think Christo figures to improve off the race. I think Midnight Hawk is going to be a solid horse, but we'll see where he shows up next.
Yeah, I agree with your assessment on Christo. I liked him better in this race. I think, if anything, it was a little bit of a good schooling for him because he was kind of forced to rate, which I think will pay dividends down the line. I think he really wants to go further, unlike Midnight Hawk, who, we won't know until we see it, but I really don't think he really wants any part of 10 furlongs. And I don't think they're ever going to get him to rate. And if he goes out flying, wanting the lead every time like that, that's going to be an issue going down the line. So I'm with you. I like Christo a lot coming out of the race.
A couple of exciting maidens at Gulfstream Park. First, let's talk about Constitution. Last week, you picked Constitution. Actually, our horse is scratched. But the horse that I picked, Hartford, came back on a different race. So let's talk about those 2 impressive winners. First, Constitution, and then Hartford.
Yeah, Constitution ran last week at Gulfstream. That race was pretty much between him and Juba, who we talked about before. They're both by Tappet. Constitution, he really impressed me. We talked about him. This was his debut, and he's well regarded. It was a debut people were really looking forward to. And he was pretty much as advertised. He came out there. He had a tough, he hesitated at the start, and he still got to the front and got it done. I think with our discussion last week about Tappets, I think this race is a tale of 2 Tappets. Constitution was everything you'd want to see from a Tappet. The fact that he hesitated at the start and was still able to pass a bunch of horses and get to the front, that was really impressive to me, that he had that kind of focus and mental ability, being a Tappet. Juba, on the other hand, showed me everything he showed me before. Coming down the stretch, I thought he got unfocused again. He's a good horse physically, but I think his head is really going to get in his way, and that's unfortunate.
Kind of a different build on each one. I noticed Juba definitely carries more weight. Constitution's a little more streamlined and racy looking. I noticed Juba was probably a little bit taller than Constitution, and I think both horses were good. The only negative, I had to play contrarian on my blog, is I actually thought Constitution's trip actually ended up being a benefit to him. By breaking slow, he actually ran 15 feet fewer than the last 10 7-furlong winners at Gulfstream Park. And if you take that as a length is 10 feet, he won by a half length. And I would have been more impressed if he would have went 3 wide, dueled for the lead, and then drew off on the outside of the track. But if you really watch right at the top of the stretch, it was impressive that he went to the rail like that, but he saved a lot of ground. I mean, that horse was, that was bull rail type scraping as he took the lead over Juba. So impressive that he went to the inside, but he did save a lot of ground. Hartford came out and kind of amazed some people today. We're recording this on a Thursday. He's another son of Tappet, and this one's a big gray. I noticed he's very long legs, long pasterns. Looked really good from reports and photos in the paddock and at Gulfstream Park. He was hammered at the windows and ran to the advanced billing.
Yeah, it was a pretty easy win from him. Maybe the only pick was at the very start. He bumped whoever was just outside. He bumped him at the start, but didn't prove to be any sort of issue. I can't really take a lot from this race though. He was on the lead or close to the lead almost the entire time. It was slow early on and faster. Like the Constitution race early on was much faster than the Hartford race. So I mean, he did what he had to do, but I don't think this is a race I can get overly excited about just yet. I want to see him again. I want to see him under a little more pressure at a little bit quicker pace. You know, maybe have him race, see if he can handle the dirt in his face, see if he can handle, like we said, Constitution was able to handle, you know, getting up to the front despite having a pack of horses in front of him, being able to handle, you know, going after multiple targets per se. There's just a lot of questions about him still. So he looks good. You know, everything about him is good so far, but I can't be like jumping up for joy thinking he's the next Derby horse yet. There's still a lot of questions. But I wonder for you, the fact that he scratched out of the Constitution race and came here to, I mean, what I think we both agree was an easier spot. Do you think there's anything we can read into that?
I'm not reading anything into it. I do think that the pecking order, because Constitution had scratched the week before when he had Vince Ramos win.
Mm-hmm.
So really what I think Todd Pletcher's doing with this arsenal of horses is he's kind of just bringing them out one at a time. But as we get further into January, you can't make up time. The Derby is the first Saturday in May, and they ain't going to move it back for any of the trainers. I'm with you. I'm a little on the skeptical side. One of the reasons why I picked him last week was nothing's changed. He's still got those long legs, and the Tappets with the really long legs seem to have shorter racing careers. And he's also his mom was a stakes-winning sprinter on the East Coast. So the pedigree isn't as strong on the mare side as Constitution. So of the two, I would be more impressed down the road, projecting. I would be more impressed with Constitution. To me, they still got a long way to go, just because when you start your career in January, mm-hmm. developmentally, historically, it's a lot different than starting in October or November. And as recently as 10 years ago, horses traditionally started in August and September. In the last few years, it's now become September, October. So nice wins from both of them. I think we'll definitely see them moving up in class, and some other big maiden winners last week. Let's talk this week. We've got two exciting stakes races, the LeComte Stakes and the Smarty Jones. First off, down in the Bayou, the LeComte Stakes.
Yeah, it seems like this race, the horse everyone's really talking about is Gold Hawk. He's by Empire Maker. He's kind of made trouble for himself a little bit in his races, but he's done nothing wrong. He's undefeated to this point. He's an interesting one for me. I want to like him, but something's holding me back. I don't really know if he's. Maybe he just hasn't been as flashy as some of the other horses we've seen. But like I said, he's by Empire Maker, who also starts good horses, Royal Delta, Pioneer of the Nile. He was a $450,000 yearling. There's a lot to like about him. The pedigree's there, but he hasn't wowed me on track per se, at least not to this point. But out of this race, I think, like we talked about in the past races, who's the one we want now? Who's the one looking forward? Gold Hawk, I think, is the one we want looking forward. I'm not sure we want him now.
Gold Hawk, the reason why he hasn't wowed you is because he hasn't run very fast. He's been impressive. He's 2 for 2, but the speed figure guys and the sheet guys are going all in against Gold Hawk. The public is going to be betting Gold Hawk very heavy. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, classic pedigree. When you when you talk about a pedigree for 10 furlongs, there's very few American horses that actually have it. Empire Maker himself won the Belmont, ran second in the Derby, and was a very one of the true distance horses we've had in the last 15 years. And it looks like he's going to be the sire that extends that next generation of distance horses, as he's already started to stamp some of that into Pioneer of the Nile. The mare, Caressing, she competed in multiple Grade 1 stakes, so you have a horse that was a Grade 1 winner at a classic distance by a Grade 1 winner. So down the road, Gold Hawk will definitely be on a lot of my tickets, but for me, as a bettor, this is the time to take a stand against him. He has speed figures that are slower than 3 or 4 rivals in this race. So my selection on my blog is Vickers in Trouble. One of the things that I like about him is that even though the race has a couple of speed horses in Albano, and there's a couple other horses that may go to the lead, Vickers in Trouble the last race won by 13 lengths, and he's by a sire called Into Mischief. And last year on the Derby Trail, Into Mischief had 2 stakes winners in the month of January. One was on the West Coast in Golden Sense, the other one on the East Coast in Vijack. And it's January, and this horse has 2 races, and I'm a firm believer in form cycles and sires and early maturation and late developing. I think Vickers in Trouble is the now horse, just like last week Midnight Hawk was the now horse. So I'm going with Vickers in Trouble as my top selection.
Yeah, I like him on top as well. I agree with you. I think he's the now horse. I'm a little biased. I'm a big fan of Into Mischief. He was a very, very good 2-year-old and early 3-year-old. He won the Cash Call Futurity over Colonel John. And like you said, he started Golden Sense and Vijack, who were both, I think Vijack at this point last year was undefeated. Golden Sense, of course, went on to win the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. And Into Mischief was also a half to the holder. So a little bit of form there, too. Vickers in Trouble, his dam sire is Vicker, who is like perennially a top sire in Korea, which is interesting too. The connections are their top connections. He's owned by the Ramseys. He's trained by Mike Maker. I was looking up some of the trainer stats for Mike Maker at Fairgrounds this meet, and for races on dirt, he's winning at a 20% clip, and he's in the top 3 73% of the time. So it's all there. Rosie McCravnick rode him in both his pair of starts, including the one you just mentioned, where he won by 13 lengths. And in that race, he was easing down, going to the wire too. I mean, he could have won by a lot more than that, even. Crazy enough. You know, she's really good at the fairgrounds as well. So it just seems like everything is there. I don't think that he is a 10 furlong horse. I think this distance is right up his alley. For that race, you talked about where he won by 13 lengths. I think his bare speed figure was 98, which was one of the highest of any of the 2-year-olds last year. I want to say off the top of my head, the only ones I can think of that were higher was maybe Havana and the Champagne, and I think Share Belief had 2. The Cash Call Futurity for sure. I think he maybe had another one that was 99 or 100. So, I mean, that speed figure fits in right with the big boys. And I just think he's the right horse at the right time. This is kind of a perfect storm for him. So.
Great. I like Smarty's Echo as my second choice. This horse is getting a lot of positives and a lot of negatives, and one of the things I always try to do is try to read between the lines on the past performances. And for some people, they're going to say, oh, his only win is on the poly track, he's not a dirt horse. But I have to play the contrarian type view, and Smarty Jones was a pure dirt horse, the sire, and he was by elusive quality. The mare, Eastern Echo, was a lightly raced son that also has a lot of speedy, precocious runners on the dirt. And what I like about this horse was he ran at the poly track at Keeneland on that day they had that driving monsoon rain. And the track, it was pouring rain during the race. And he ended up running second. Then 25 days later, he's out in sunny California. He had to run a hard race, and then he had to ship. He gets the 1 hole in a 13-horse field. He comes out of the gate and pretty much just kind of jogged around the track, just did not run his race. In 2 other starts, the trip notes mention problems out of the gate, And I noticed there's two gate workouts from Ann Smith, who's a very low profile Midwest trainer, and then a nice couple of bullet workouts. And I'm just going to throw out the last race, go back to his runner-up finish in the Arlington, Washington Futurity when he pressed a fast pace and then came home really slow against Solitary Ranger. So Smarty's Echo is going to be 10 to 12 to 1, and I think he's going to run in the money. That's what I'm thinking, even though Vickers in Trouble is my top pick.
I like Vickers in Trouble on top. I'm a little concerned, I think you mentioned earlier, that Albano is in here too, and I'm a little concerned we can get maybe a speed up front between those two. So if that happens, my second choice is Got Shades, who also ran in the Breeders' Cup Day. He ran the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, and in that race, I hadn't been too impressed with him to that point. I think he won a couple stakes at Louisiana Downs before going there. But that race, if you watch it, he was in the back riding just inside of Outstrip for most of the race. And then right before they went into the turn, Outstrip kind of got the first jump on him, and he blocked him out. And he steadied pretty badly behind him. He pulled himself together, followed Outstrip somewhat through the field, and ended up finishing 5th. But I was really impressed with his maturity in that race to be able to gather himself after what I would at least consider a major issue and fairly close to the finish. And he was able to gather himself together, keep going, keep pressing forward. A lot of horses, especially young horses, you don't see that. Sometimes they kind of fold when things don't go their way. And he definitely didn't prove to be of that type. He obviously is very talented if he was able to pass so many high-quality horses like that. I mean, surely he was helped a bit by the pace that Bobby's Kitten set in that race, but he made a major move at the end that I really liked. The question is if he'll take to the dirt, but the works I've seen, I don't know how he's looked, but they've been quick. So hopefully he'll take to the dirt, and if he does, I think if the pace gets hot up front between Vickers in Trouble and Albano, he's one of the ones who can really kind of pick up the pieces underneath.
I'm glad you mentioned the pace of the race, and that's going to lead us into our bankroll discussion. On the season, I made $1 last week on my place bet on Midnight Hawk because of the 2 scratches, and your win bet on Cristo went down the tube. So the reason why my top selection is Vickers in Trouble, but sometimes you have to bet horses that aren't your top selection. And I know Gold Hawk is going to receive a lot of betting action. And I'm not sure. Gold Hawk is one of those horses that could win the race or he could run out of the money. And I'm not quite as sold on Vickers in Trouble as a guaranteed winner. But I do think no matter what happens in this race, no matter what the pace scenario is, I do think Smarty's Echo is going to run good. And that's my wager, $10 to show on Smarty's Echo.
Yeah, I'm $5 to win, $10 to place on Vickers in Trouble. He'll be up at the front, I'm sure. It's kind of dependent on the pace. If Albano pushes him too much, I think it might be tough for him to get the win. But I think he has the speed to be up there no matter what.
Let's talk about the Smarty Jones race going off on Monday. Kind of an untraditional day. It'll be in Arkansas at Oaklawn Park. Nice field. Any early thoughts?
I mean, for me, the one I'm looking to is Coastline. He most recently ran in the Delta Downs Jackpot where he had trouble. I think he stumbled pretty badly at the start. He was the favorite in that race. So, having a start like that, I can, completely draw a line through it. I think he's the one you're looking to here. There's a few interesting horses I saw today. I don't know if you saw this, but I saw today that Baji Moon is maybe running in there. That's kind of a bizarre one to me. But I think Coastline is really the one that we're looking for.
Traditionally, this has been a nice prep. Last year, Will Take Charge ran in the Smarty Jones, and of course he ended up being a solid 3-year-old. Some of the horses in the race, the Cajun Cat is kind of interesting. He's got a little bit of speed, showed some speed at the fairgrounds. Interesting, sometimes the horses that go from the fairgrounds to Oaklawn has a stretch run that is about 150 feet less shorter than the fairgrounds. So sometimes one of the angles I like to play with claimers and some of the allowance races is take a horse that maybe faded in the last 50, 100 yards at fairgrounds, and then they'll keep on running at Oaklawn Park. Another horse that I did want to mention, we have another Tappet sighting.
Oh, I
Um,
wanted to bring him up.
yes, comes in from Laurel Park,
Yeah.
and Firestarter, a 10-length win. What's interesting is his company lines. He's faced Rye and Purple Sky and Commanding Curve.
Hmm.
Commanding Curve is pointing towards the Risen Star. Rye is a horse that has some solid breeding that's on my list of horses to watch. Has not worked out yet in 2014, so if he doesn't get on the work tab soon, I'll have to X him out of there. But his 10-length win last race out at Laurel was visually impressive, and they gave him a 105 speed rating, which is unheard of. So if you just flat out want to play speed, Firestarter definitely has a shot.
Yeah, I was just watching that race before we came on here and started filming today, and it was really nice. The fact that he won by 10, he started slow in that race, and he didn't pass the leaders till, I mean, it was kind of a guesstimate, but maybe halfway down the stretch. This was not like a move that he made going into the straight. He made it about halfway through and just blasted by everybody and still won by 10. It was a really, really nice race. I mean, what he beat, I don't know, was the maiden special weight, but he looked really strong there.
It was impressive visually. Again, the high speed figure, another
Mm-hmm.
Tappet. Now, it's interesting, one of the things I always talk about, because I like to watch the form cycles of three-year-olds and two-year-olds. One of the things I've noticed over the years is many horses will, what I call, make the jump. In either their
Mm-hmm.
third or fourth lifetime race, they significantly improve their speed figure.
Yeah.
And that's what Firestarter did in his last race. So I'm wondering if he made the jump, not necessarily going to be a regression, but he's already made that leap. So
Mm-hmm.
if nobody else makes the leap in this race, he may be able to win. I'm going with Coastline. We did not talk about this race beforehand, but again, that's who I'm going to be picking in my blog.
Yeah.
I threw out the last race. He did not just get off to a bad start the last race. He was left flat-footed. I mean, he lost
Mm-hmm.
3 lengths at the start of the race. Before that, he clearly had beaten a couple of nice fields at Churchill Downs. He's been working at Gulfstream, which means there's a little bit of a concern shipping. There is a reason why trainers don't like to ship newly turned 3-year-olds, because a lot of times it doesn't end positively. So that is a little bit of a concern shipping, but he does have a little bit of a class edge. I'm a big fan of Spacetown as a sire. He's very versatile. Is he going to be a classic 10 furlong Derby horse? No, but I do think he's going to make a lot of money, and I think he can win races up to 9 furlongs. And I think this is the type of horse that you'll be watching all summer long. Those Spacetowns are hardy. I think you'll see him in races like the Iowa Derby, the Remington Park Derby. He'll progress along the Triple Crown Trail, and who knows, maybe he'll improve and he'll earn the right to start in the Derby. But so it's not a classic pedigree. I like Coastline. He's a flashy gray. He's built differently than most grays. He's got a little bit of muscle, built like a route horse, and he just seems to be, I don't know, he has the wide eyes. He just seems to be a smart horse.
I like Coastline as well, for many of the same reasons that you just said. I won't repeat them. What I will say, though, is maybe for people to pay attention to Goldhawk and how he runs. We have Unstoppable Colby, I think, is running in the Smarty Jones, and he exits the Goldhawk Maiden Special Weights. He finished second in that race. He's by Pulpit. He's out of a Stormcat mare. So he's still maiden, but the fact that he finished, I mean, a relatively close second to Goldhawk is just worth noting and keeping an eye on, especially since this race is after the LeComte.
Yes, his second to Goldhawk. The only thing I'll note is my notes say he went 3 to 4 wide. He had the 10 hole that day. He showed speed, and that was a contentious pace. And that's one of my better angles, is whenever I see what I call a contentious race is whenever you have 5 horses at the half-mile pole within 2 lengths. And I
Mm-hmm.
think with a lot of 2-year-olds and early developing horses is that they're just not used to all that frenzied action.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like horses that remain calm during that type of frenzied action. And he did. He took the lead, and then he just got beat by a better horse late down the lane. The other note is he outgalloped him. So after the wire, Unstoppable Colby galloped out, which means there may be a little bit of a distance edge for him here. But he is a maiden, and he is a maiden for a reason after 3
Mm-hmm.
races. It's also his 3rd racetrack, and he's raced on Pauley, he's raced in the slop. If at some point maybe the excuse is they're just not that good too.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good look. You know, a horse that's interesting is Walt. He's a speedster. He won twice at Remington Park. They rated him in the last race in the Springboard Mile, and that was also the third straight win for Louis Flower. I think Walt looks better in. I think he'll run a better race in that last race. Looks on paper, and if they let him if they go back to the front running tactics, he could be pretty tough in here. So Walt, he's not my top choice, but if the odds were right, and on Monday I'm looking to throw a horse into an exotic filler, Walt as a speedster has some intrigue to me. Well, some great handicapping insight this week, Candace. I know you're going to be putting up some other picks on some other races on your blog, Captain with Candace. I'm looking forward to the LeComte probably a little bit more than the Sham. Now, next week we don't have any major races for 3-year-olds coming up, so we will actually take more of an in-depth dive. We're going to call it our Kentucky Derby Roundtable, where we kind of just spill out our notebooks to each other and kind of give people some insights, kind of verify some speed figures, talk about some positives and negatives for some of the few horses, and then we'll also just maybe by region, we'll list some of the top contenders where they're actually currently stabled at. So I think that'll be an interesting show, especially for some people that don't have time to spend and go to all the different websites that me and you frequent. It might be a good way for them to see where some of their favorite horses are at. Any race that you're in particular looking forward to this week, either 3-year-old or older, or what's your focus this weekend?
There's some good ones. We have the Sunshine Millions at Gulfstream. We have some really nice, I think on Fairgrounds Day we have a really nice race for the fillies. I think it's a Kentucky Oaks prep there. That's a good one too. So to keep in mind if you're watching the same card as LeComte.
There's nothing wrong when you get to watch the Mucho Macho Man do his stuff. He's back at Gulfstream. Hopefully it doesn't rain on his parade like it did last year. So that's what I'm looking for as one of the older horses. It's going to be a fun weekend. I think hopefully we have some nice dry weather across a lot of the areas, and I'm hoping both the tracks for the LeComte and Smarty Jones come up fast. That's going to do it for another edition of Down to the Wire. Make sure to follow Candace on Twitter, myself, Derbyologist, both our websites, derbyologist.com and Captain with Candace. And until next week, we have our first Derby Roundtable. That's going to do it for another edition of Down to the Wire.